also should be recording this, so we are now recording. I should also add that anyone who is watching this through the Zoom and is in this room as our audience, you're welcome to keep your cameras on so we can see our lovely audience. We do just ask if everyone could keep their microphones muted while they're not talking, just to avoid any interference and things like that. There will be time at the end for questions from the audience, so if you want to pop your camera on, or you can just post in the chat and I can ask it on your behalf. Both of those options are available. So enough from me, let's crack on. And we're going to start by just inviting each artist to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the work and yeah, the sort of inspiration and how they interpreted this historical brief that was presented to them. And I think we will begin with Suke Driver, if that's okay. Suke, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Suke, otherwise known as Catastro, and I lived in Poplar for 8 years, and the mural that I ended up animating was always around the corner from where I lived, and I passed it by all the time. I loved it. I loved the story. So it was a no-brainer when I saw this festival. That was what I wanted to do, considering as well in a lot of lockdown that I've been geeking out over Adobe After Effects, so that, you know, things in motion. So it seemed obvious that that was the way I was going to go. So yeah, so I animated it, and then I'm also kind of a musician, kind of sound sculpture, so it was obvious there was going to be sound as well. And my mate came in at the last minute, Paul, to be the voice of George, and we did some of the background noises together, and, you know, free the Poplar 30 and all this business. So it was great fun, and I really wanted to make it feel like you were there, you know, at the time when all this was going on. So that was kind of where I was trying to head with it. Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Suke. Yeah, I can't wait to ask you a bit more about your work and being a resident of Tower Hamlets.
Thank you.
Great. Shall we go to maybe let's go to Phoebe and Roger, and you can battle it out between you of who goes first.
I can go first.
Well, you're the theatre maker, aren't you?
I'm Phoebe. I'm a poet and theatre maker, and I made the film with my dad kind of around pub culture in 1921 and 2021, and thinking about inequalities and how pubs are kind of designed, but also our personal histories within pubs, intertwining that into the film. My dad, you can introduce yourself.
Well, yes, I can. I have my beer in my hand. Yeah. We thought we'd do pub culture as the basis because working class culture in Poplar was very much based around the pub or around avoiding the pub because there was a very quite lethal temperance movement going on at the time. And so our original plan was to have a pub in Poplar and a pub in Kensington as the contrast. However, the pandemic...
But yes, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. So explain what you do. What's your thing? What's
my thing?
Yeah.
I'm retired from all the things I ever did. I've spent a lifetime as a historian, a history teacher, and various other subjects. I'm also a musician, and though not usually playing a banjo in the way I did at the Windsor Castle where we did our film, and that's my claim to fame.
Wonderful.
And of course, I'm Phoebe's dad. Very, very important. But the idea was to talk about working class culture based around pubs, and the way in which it must have been in 1921 when they very bravely took on Lloyd George's government. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Phoebe and Roger. Yeah, there's a lot I want to ask you about, actually. Your pub culture is not something I think we talk about enough. Maybe we take it a bit for granted, or maybe we don't take it for granted, having not been allowed in pubs for the last year. But let's let's see when we come to you in a moment. Great. Let's cut across to our second group, I guess, of artists, and that is Shkembe Soup. We've got Tom and Sally. Please introduce yourselves and your other soup artists that aren't here today.
Yeah, hi there. Hi. So there's myself, Sally, Tom, my brother, and quite a few of the Shkembe Soups are here as well. I can see Deanne, Fiona, Rosie, Anna. I saw Toyin earlier as well, so there's quite a few of us here. So we're a local group based in the East End. We make up our own songs and music, and we play lots of genres of music and have fun and really love this local area. And when we saw the Poplarism invitation to submit an artistic piece of work, we read up together on Zoom all about the 1921 Poplar Rebellion, and we all went away and came back and found loads of information about it. And we're really inspired to create a film, a short video, connecting the local activism that happened in 1921 to local activism that is taking place in Tower Hamlets today. So, we referred to the Bethnal Green mulberry tree and the canal community gardens, and we filmed in the places that we find that we absolutely love in this area, to sort of show everybody the area, how beautiful it is, and to raise awareness of the activism. And during that process, all of us, well, speaking for myself, became much more aware of the past events and the bravery of everybody, what happened, and the fact that you've got agency today, and that your activism really, really counts today. So we learned a lot about the past, about the future, and it gave us a lot of confidence to be active today. Tom,
so, I agree with all of that. It also, I think it challenged us to raise our game a bit compared to kind of thing we've done before. We've done a couple of videos before, but nothing nothing as ambitious as this. And also the song was based on a Bulgarian folk song, which Linda's grandmother taught her, and we'd been trying to record that for a long time in lockdown, with all of us recording parts on our phones basically, and then me trying to put it together, and we'd never finished it, and it was waiting for something, and this was it, and our videos, sorry. And yes, and it starts and finishes with the Siganka Stara song, but then Anna, who's with us, wrote 4 new verses all about Poplarism, which we've added in, and then Sally and Mardy and others, and Rosie, who's here, wrote that there's a speech in the middle from the point of view of the mulberry tree, and so that was written, and then we had to do some hurried editing to make a 4-minute song 8 minutes long, and adding violin at the last minute, and also meeting Deanne in Mile End Park for her to sing her harmonies on it, and standing in the middle of the park singing into my phone, and it came out really well, and then as well the funding that we got as well, that helped us, because we were able to pay a film editor. We started editing ourselves, and then we brought in a film editor, Charlie Sen, who really put on the finishing touches and had some wonderful ideas which made the whole thing come together. So basically we've had a blast making this.
Yeah, learned a lot.
Yeah, and we've enjoyed watching all the others today as well. And I can see parallels with Suke's animation, because she was, you know, quoting from George Lansbury, and that had a lot in common with what we wrote, that from the point of view of the mulberry tree. You know, it was telling the same story, but, you know, ours was our interpretation, and Suke was obviously from a primary source. And we've also got a certain amount in common with Roger and Phoebe, I would say, in that I own a banjo, although I've never dared play it in public, you know, and also some of our children have experienced the same as Phoebe in being dragged around all the pubs.
Amazing, thank you. And Tom, I'm going to have to stop. You're taking the questions out of my mouth, especially drawing those parallels with Suke's work as well. So I promise I'm not plagiarizing Tom when I start asking my questions in a moment. But thank you both, and it's lovely to know that we've got some of your fellow collaborators and company members here as well. So thank you also to everyone else who's here tonight. Great, Eliot, it would be lovely to hear from you and about your work as well.
Yeah, my name's Eliot. I'm a London-based musician, and yeah, I suppose I took a sort of more indirect angle on it. I read up about it. I mean, I hadn't actually heard about this rebellion before, so it was very interesting to know about. And yeah, so I was just sort of thinking about it from like the actual period of history between two wars, you know, First and Second World Wars, and I thought that it was appropriate. The lyrics are actually inspired by W.H. Auden, who was an Anglo-American. So I was sort of thinking about it as a kind of someone who is like nostalgic for their homeland, you know, because he was based in the States, and so he was. So I was sort of trying to kind of conjure up an image of nostalgia for coming back to England, and I was supposed to sort of invoke like some of the amazing songwriting that has come out of London. So yeah, I was sort of looking at it from a sort of outsider looking in, really. But yeah, so I didn't take a very direct approach about, you know, I didn't really want to write a sort of like a kind of a protest song, but yeah, I thought that I would just sort of take a more alternative angle to it. And yeah, I found the actual story of the rebellion very interesting, and the way it actually sort of leveled, you know, the results of what happened were very inspiring. You know, actually had so yeah, so I sort of took a more alternative angle, I suppose.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, it's our first Poplarism sort of debut, but in terms of the actual sort of model of the commission itself for Poplar Union, this is our third one, and each time we've sort of given a brief to and an open call out to artists. It's so fascinating to see how people interpret it, and it's sometimes some of the most interesting work is that, like you say, that comes at it from a really different angle or has a sort of sense of distance from the actual events itself. So yeah, it's certainly something I will be grilling you deeply on shortly. I won't be, don't worry. Nothing too intense. And then finally, last but not least, ShumGhostJohn, who are arranged so perfectly that you look like an album cover. Please introduce yourselves.
Hello everyone, we are in the exhibition space. I'm Sandra, the curator of the exhibition of ShumGhostJohn here. Hello, I'm Sham.
I'm Ghost.
And I'm John. So we together are
ShumGhostJohn. Yeah. So we are in the gallery exhibition space today. So we are having a live performance at 2 p.m. for the Poplarism Festival today. And yes.
And we live stream on our Facebook page, which you all can watch it afterwards.
Yeah, our work is called Thousand Papers, Scenes in Cantonese. The work was first inspired by the people's action and movement during the protest in Hong Kong and how collective power could be shown through the work of origami, which is paper folding art inspired by the Japanese traditional technique. And then we are connecting to what happened 100 years ago in 1921, where 30 councillors were arrested, as everyone knows, and comparing it to what happened in Hong Kong right now, where 54 councillors in Hong Kong is right now in jail for very similar action, standing up for the people, speaking up for injustice. So we're looking at what happened 100 years ago here in Poplar, where this exhibition site is what happened 100 years ago is now happening in Hong Kong. How do we connect these events to the greater context of history?
Yeah, and the origami was like folded because we want to like hang our dreams and hopes on the like ceiling, and to make all these hopes and dreams come true, kind of making the wish that the society will become a better place for us to live.
Yes.
Yeah, it's also a collective sculpture. We all invite people to come in and write down their hopes, write down their story, and then we'll do some one-to-one performances, and then we invite them to build this collective sculpture together.
Yeah, we are on exhibition until the coming Thursday. So the vision is that this sculpture will just keep growing and growing, and the room will become more and more crowded by the papers.
Yeah, we also noticed about the COVID safe thing. So we restrict people like less than 6 people getting into the exhibition, so that we can ask them to wear masks and also use hand sanitizer. So if you want to come, feel free to come, and then we'll like do whatever measure that we can do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Yeah, and if you go to, so ShumGhostJohn's work at the moment is listed on the Finborough Theatre's YouTube page, because as I was saying in the intro, we did a sort of exchange. So all of our West London artists are listed on Poplar Union's page, all of our East London artists are on the Finborough's, and there are details in the description under their video of how you can see the exhibition. So do check that out. Great. Well, now we're all such good friends, let's just begin with the questions. And as I mentioned earlier, Tom from Shkembe Soup had already started asking this first question. So for Tom and Sally, and also for Suke, the work you both produced is so rooted, quite literally, and no pun intended, with the mulberry tree in the borough. And like Suke, your work focuses on the mural, which is so sort of such a specific location and place, and really sort of well-known site in Poplar. But starting with Sally and Tom, I'm interested to know, for you, what is the identity of Tower Hamlets, and with all of its history, but then also thinking, like we said, moving between the history and the present. What does Tower Hamlets mean to you as an organisation and as individuals?
Wow, what a question. And by the way, if any of the other Shkembes want to come in and answer this with me, that'd be lovely. Well, I don't know what to say really. I just love living in Tower Hamlets. I love all the different communities that exist here. I love all the different people who bring different heritages and experiences and stories, all come and live here. So I don't think it's not homogenous, it's not one thing, it's so many things really. And I just love the way everyone works together. I don't know, what Tom would you think?
I think I agree with what you say, and and again, when we thought about it, we thought, you know, where are the places we love the most, and we filmed some of them, you know, but we possibly could have filmed more, but you know, some of us live in Tower Hamlets, some of us live very near Tower Hamlets. Those places where we filmed were places we feel part of.
Yeah.
Oh, can I say it's also like our cradle for rehearsal, because we all rehearse then. It's so amazing to have a space to rehearse, and that's in Tower Hamlets. So it's our little rockabye baby cradle in Tower Hamlets.
Yeah.
Well, it's in a housing co-op, which was houses that were saved and became and made into a co-op, and it saved all those houses. And there was a scheme to demolish all the houses and build a big road down to Mile End. And I was squatting in one of those houses, and the people who moved out of the street that we went to, called Longfellow Road, was handed their keys over to all the squatters, who then used the houses for a few years, but then actually ended up having to move it. But we managed to save some of the windows and the things that were to be demolished and put them in the co-op houses, which had been ransacked for floorboards and everything else. And we saved that. And so it's an area of huge change with, you know, it's always been an area of immigration, you know, Chinese, I can't think at the moment, but, you know, and also a landscape that's been changed and is still changing, with the past being wiped out. I was in the hospital work, and the person I was working with said, "Do you see that house over there?" And so I said, "Yes." And he said, "See the radiator? That's where I used to dry my socks." So he was seeing the past being wiped out and replaced by a garage, you know. But these are memories that are valuable to be saved, you know. Yeah, that's I can't think of anything else. But I read the whole book. I never knew anything about Poplarism. And then I found this book in our house and nobody had ever read it. And so I read it all, and I didn't understand all the ins and outs of quite, but it was really fascinating read, you know, and amazing how brave they were. And also it sort of parallels with today and the splits in the Labour Party, because Morrison, the Labour mayor there, didn't agree with what they were doing and felt they shouldn't, you know, go to prison. They shouldn't do what they were doing. They should pay up these.
Being respectable.
So they didn't have the support of their own Labour Party, and they were a Labour council, so they still stuck to it. Well, in a way, they had no alternative to at the time.
And also Morrison, of course, was Peter Mandelson's granddad.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I learned a lot by reading. I learned a lot, and it was really fascinating. And I wouldn't have read that book or anything if I hadn't have been involved in this. So it's interesting.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's a fascinating history. And also I know Tower Hamlets archives we met with Halima, who works in the archives. I met with her last week, and they've got a lot of different events. We're hoping to have an exhibition actually in a few months, showing a lot of the materials that are in those books that you've mentioned, because there is such a rich history surrounding this event. But like you say, so many people don't know this history, and it's kind of being eradicated. So yeah, I really recommend people do check out the archives in Tower Hamlets as well.
I actually asked what book that was, actually, who that book was written by. You just showed.
Well, the one I've got is an old one. It's Noreen Branson, Poplarism 1919 to 1925.
Oh, right.
I got this secondhand years ago, and that's partly why I contacted Paul Beth with the idea for this. And I didn't know, I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what. But we talked and came up with this on the model of what Poplar Union has done before. What's the one you've got there?
I think it's the same one, but it's a different. Noreen Branson, you said.
Yes. Oh, I've got an old one. I've got an old second-hand one. We got the same one.
Yeah. Well, this was in 1975. It said.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's it looks almost new because no one's been on the bookshelf all those years. No one read it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I've got Janine Booth's biography of Minnie Lansbury.
Oh, okay.
And Minnie Lansbury was was of course Jewish, and so I loved the way that we got this wonderful, all right, Bulgarian but Eastern European song connected us to that very varied, very varied population of Poplar then and now. And very appropriate.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. And it's interesting just hearing you mentioning there about housing as well, and squatting, and that sort of relationship to the history. And I turn now to Suke Driver, and how, so your work, as we've sort of mentioned, it really locates the history through your animation of the mural and really sort of signposting it to that place. But I know another sort of important part of your work was the fact it was dedicated to the residents of Fitzgerald House. So I'm really curious to hear from you and from your creative perspective, but also from your experience living in the borough. What do you think for you? What does it mean to be a resident in Tower Hamlets as a place to call your home? And when you were here, how did that feel? How do you see that changing? Yeah, what's your relationship to that as someone living in the borough?
I ended up here because of beginning to live in a housing co-op, so in social housing. So I kind of that kind of took me on that kind of road of knowing about Poplar from that perspective of social housing and seeing it dwindle, because I did quite a lot with the co-op. I was quite involved with our co-op. I've only just left 2019. So I ended up in Balfour Tower on the 21st floor with the co-op, and then that got privatised, and then I moved 5 minutes away to Fitzgerald House. So in lockdown, they were all given notice to quit last year, about 3 or 4 years earlier than was planned. And I think the block is just going to lay empty until it gets demolished. So I think for me, the story is very much tied in with sort of social housing. For me, that's you know, that kind of, you know, George and his his gang, they really sort of stuck up for the poor people of Poplar, and I don't know, yeah, I mean, I get that sense of wanting to stick up for the people of Poplar in a way, and also why I wanted to get involved with the project is that I just think it's such an inspiring story, and I just wanted to help it maybe gather a bit more traction, and like, because it's sort of digital, that it might reach some more audiences, especially the mural. I mean, you know, the mural, because that's obviously static, it's in Hale Street, and so yeah, yeah, so that's kind of where I'm, yeah.
That's definitely a big hope for us as well, and I know that Neil shares this, that with the festival, just raising awareness of the events of what happened before, and being based in Poplar, and already a couple of people have mentioned how much change the area has undergone, and when we speak with our neighbours and our local residents and people that sort of come to the different things we put on at Poplar Union, we really quickly, from when we first opened, we identified that one of the best ways to preserve that history, or to sort of alleviate the anxiety of people that have lived there, or families have lived there for generations, is to really celebrate the heritage of the area and not let that be forgotten. So
I mean, the change is sweeping through it, isn't it, quite fast?
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I just think the power of protest, you know, and especially nowadays when you've got the kind of these new kind of legislations trying to hit through, you know, I just think that it's just inspiring to see how protest actually does change things, you know, from the grassroots, you know. So I was going to say something else there. I'm completely gone out my head. Never mind.
Come back to us if it comes back. Let us know.
I will do. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right as well. I think like the fact today's festival began on the day of, we had the Kill the Bill demo today, and confronting this suppression of the right to protest. So yeah, it couldn't be more timely. But from protests to pubs, I turn now to the wonderful Phoebe and Roger Wagner. So as you sort of touched on in your introduction, I love that you use kind of the pub as a bit of a vehicle in a way to sort of time travel back into 1921 and the present day. But I also really, one of the things I really enjoyed about your work was how it's kind of, it's not only intergenerational in terms of talking from present to history, but for you as a father and a daughter, and then also as essentially being a man and a woman making work as well. And you touched really in a really sort of nuanced way on the gendered history as well of 1921 pub culture. And I was interested just to hear sort of with that theme that came out of it, was that sort of what came first? Did the kind of gendered history, did that spring from your research into the history of the pubs, or did you know that that was something you wanted to explore? And what was that sort of figuring out that relationship between the two of you and that history? What was the process like for that?
So the process is it a bit echoey? I just heard it really echo. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Okay. Yeah, the process kind of, the way we worked together was a lot over Zoom. So I'm based in the Isle of Dogs, and my dad is based back at home in my in where I'm from, which is Croydon. And how we did a lot of Zoom discussions, just because my dad, at the time when we applied for this, he had just started reading this book about Minnie Lansbury actually, and was telling me all of this history, and I'd never heard of any of this stuff before. And since moving here, my dad really got into that stuff, so it was kind of like this kind of opportunity came along. I was like, that would be a really great opportunity for us to kind of explore it. But the process worked a lot through chatting and a lot of me asking questions of the history. And I tend to think a lot about, you know, I ask questions about, you know, where is this sort of person? What's happening with this sort of person in pop culture? And what's happening at the time for women, and especially, you know, the suffragette movement and Minnie Lansbury very much being a part of it. It just kind of swayed that way, especially with the information my dad was giving me about how like women were treated in pubs, gave me an insight kind of like into something I hadn't really thought about or heard about before, but also showed that like not a lot's changed. Like it looks a bit different, you know, it might feel a bit different, but in terms of gender politics, it was quite interesting in that aspect. So the process was a lot of talking, and it did very much come from the pub that we were at as well, and comparing the experiences of what East London would have been experiencing to West London. So yeah, that, I don't know if you've got more to say on that, Dad. Yeah,
you got to remember 1921, which was the year my dad was born. So your granddad was born, 1921, straight after the First World War. Women had only just got the vote. So having those 5 women on Poplar Council, who then promptly went to jail because they were sticking up for the poor people of Poplar and saying, you can't skim off the top of our rates all this stuff that you want for the London-wide Metropolitan Police and so on. You can't do it because we're already poor, the poorest in London, and of course Tower Hamlets today is the poorest borough in London. It hasn't changed. The whole idea for socialists in 1921 was to say, no, we have a society and we need to maintain that society. We take from those who can afford it, what they can afford, and we give to those who need it. And they were standing up for a very old idea, the idea of community, which people would have understood 1,000 years ago, but it gets in the way of our thinking today. You're supposed to pay for everything yourself because we're all individuals, and we stick up for our family but not for our next door neighbor. And we've just been through this terrible experience, or we're going through this terrible experience of the pandemic, where suddenly people were out on the street applauding the community and realizing that age-old idea that we're all in this together and we have to look after each other. And I think that's what being in that wonderful pub in Kensington that I'd never been to before, that I'd read about, it really helped to bring it all out, because it was fairly obviously a West London pub, but the way in which it was divided up into those wonderful oak panelled bars in order to make the place respectable, allowed us to talk about the way in which pubs as community places were suspect, and for some people are still suspect as places where the working classes will get together and plan to overthrow us. And that was a very real fear in 1921. The Russian Revolution had just happened. It was still going on. And there have been revolutions in many places in Europe at the same time. So I don't know whether the pandemic will bring people together, bring communities together. We're talking about saving the world through exchanging vaccines. That's socialism. I'm sorry to tell our American friends, that is socialism. We're all in it together. This is our planet, this is our society, and we have to make sure we all survive.
Just to say as well, it's particularly interesting, your video, because obviously the Finborough is based above a pub. Unfortunately, Roger and Phoebe couldn't film there because it's currently a building site and we can't actually get into the pub. But looking at the history of the Finborough Arms, which was actually opened 150 years ago, the original design had 5 separate sections, spoon bar, snug. In one, Thomas Crapper, who invented the valve of the toilets, so you know what is named after him. He spent every working day in the Finborough. He started his working day in the Finborough Arms with a bottle of champagne in the posh bar every day. And just from the revolution point of view, everyone forgets Red Clydeside. So 1919, they sent the tanks into George Square and put the army on standby. They were scared, the government was scared. And, it's both remembering that all that ferment and, the soldiers mutinying in 1919, etc. They didn't know where this was going to go. We could have ended up like Russia.
That's right, Neil.
Yeah.
The police went on strike in 1919 in this country. Yeah, amazing. The police went on strike. They really must have been worried.
Yeah. Anyways.
No, thank you. Thanks. That's great. And yeah, I should also add that for anyone watching who is yet to watch the videos from the festival, Phoebe and Roger provided, I think in the most simple way, an explanation also of what the Poplar Rates Revolt was through the use of pistachios and almonds, which, having been working on this festival, I think Neil first suggested the idea to me in about November last year. I think it was watching your video this week that I was like, right, I've got it. It's great. So for many reasons to watch their work, but certainly to have a very clear understanding of the history.
Yeah, I had to stop Phoebe eating the nuts though, because that would have destroyed the entire enterprise.
They were right there, so I just had to.
What can you do? I mean, Kensington, Chelsea, we're tasty boroughs, so what can you do? Thank you both so much for that, and I think it's interesting, and I'd love to come to Eliot now to think about we've sort of spoken about the historical, and in many ways we've seen so far with the different artists we've spoken to some quite specific sort of interpretations, although very different in form. They hone in quite interestingly on the actual history or the events. But I think what is particularly moving with Eliot's work is I felt like with your song, it was an exploration kind of memory as well, and just the act of remembering and looking back on the past, and the tone of your for a commission that was sort of based around rebellion and revolt, there was something really sort of gentle and quite moving about your work. So Eliot, it would be great to hear more about what your thinking was around the song. You spoke a bit in the introduction about your influences, but yeah, maybe a bit about that role of sort of reflection or memory and how that plays out in your work.
Yeah, well, I guess it's like the sort of, you know, the post-industrial society that was created a huge amount of confusion with the population. No one knew what was going on, but it was all kinds of a coalescence of different events in terms of like government reform. It wasn't just you know, society was becoming industrialized and more mechanical. You know, it was all kinds of events coalesced to create something that was created a lot of alienation within people, and so yeah, so the idea was to look at it from a sort of, as you said, like a sort of a memory perspective. The idea is, yeah, it's supposed to be kind of like nostalgic. I was trying to kind of actually, with some of the top lines, conjure up like the sound of like a fairground or something like that, or like Brighton Pier, like with the keyboards, and so yeah, that was in terms of like the actual sort of musical input. And although W.H. Auden was born in 1907, so he would have been quite young when the act of the Poplar Rebellion happened. I just thought that because he was an Anglo-American poet, that he could have, the lyrics that inspired the song were kind of like him looking back, looking sort of being nostalgic from like the point of view of being in America and thinking about his country and thinking about being back in England. I don't know if that makes any sense, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nostalgia is a really interesting idea, especially when in the context of this festival, when you're looking back on something motivated by aspiration as well. We look back on an event that was entirely about changing the future, and there's a strange kind of crossing over, I guess, and a bit like Roger was alluding to, and especially, I mean, depending on your politics, I guess, but even for us now, looking back at something that for a lot of people we're still trying to achieve, or it's still an aspiration to have genuine community and genuine
like someone was saying, nothing really has actually changed. So, you know, I mean, it is kind of like, yeah, looking back into the past and seeing what we, you know, what have we actually learned from the past, and in terms of sort of social housing, equality and things like that. There's still a lot of imbalance and still a lot of inequality, and there's a lot of housing developments that are taking place, which are just really you know, badly regulated. Yeah, so
yeah, absolutely. I think I mean that kind of segues perfectly into my final question in a way, which is with our final artists, who are ShumGhostJohn, because as you may have heard in the introduction, again, like Eliot's saying, you know, this hasn't gone away. These themes are still there. People are still fighting in this country and certainly abroad, and as we'll hear with ShumGhostJohn in Hong Kong more recently, this ongoing fight for a sense of equality in our communities has not gone away at all. Maybe our means of achieving it or trying to achieve it has changed. And so I'd love to hear from all four of you, ShumGhostJohn, how you came to this, how you came to the work that you've made, and sort of, were you already thinking about making work in response to the events that we saw in Hong Kong in 2019, or did you sort of start with the rebellion, the Rates Rebellion, which led to thinking about more recent events? What was the kind of interplay between those two parts of your work?
Yeah, Thousand Papers actually was first exhibited in, was it September?
Yeah.
September 2019. So it was like the time where the Hong Kong movement broke into the international news, and then there were these group exhibitions of Hong Kong artists in London that are exhibiting different kind of works related to the social movement. And our work, Thousand Paper, is kind of like a nostalgic response towards our childhood in Hong Kong, where when we were younger, our generation, we were heavily influenced by Japanese culture. We watched Japanese animation, lots of Japanese cartoon, and then we also did origami when we were younger. And then kind of like this practice of doing origami as just for fun kind of continue in our life even after we moved country. So there's this kind of connection to where we grew up after moving the country, and then we kind of trying to incorporate that into our artistic practice. And also the fact that origami is very accessible is we're making all of this with recycled paper, with waste paper, and how these very small mini paper sculpture could then form a very large community sculpture is in a way symbolizing the people's power and the collective energy of a community when people come together, which is exactly what's happened in protests and demonstration in Hong Kong and in many other social uprisings around the world. We were very lucky to then tour this work to several different locations, and that those were all in the intention and with the mind of how can we deliver stories about Hong Kong Revolution and the people's power in the model of a community sculpture where people can come, write down things, make origami and hang up to a sculpture that would then grow and grow and grow. For this time, we are very lucky to get in contact with the owner of this space, who is a visual artist called Gary Hunter. And then we were, at that time, because we live around here, and then we were also very interested in the history of Poplarism, because we were very intrigued by the names of the street that we live on. For example, we live next to a street called Julius Square Street. And then we were like, oh, who is this person? And we look up the plaques, and then we understand the history of our band. And we found that to to be really resonant to our personal history and to what really happening around the world right now. So we decided to do this exhibition here, and then at the same time we noticed the call out for Poplarism Festival, so stars just aligned. Yeah, so we're now at Albert Street doing this exhibition. We opened this on Wednesday, and then this is our 4th day here. We'll continue until next Thursday, and will be part of Whitechapel's first day. Yeah, so it has been really, really great.
Yeah, and then behind this door is actually the landscape garden. So it's, I think the owner also like mentioned it. Oh, you are a part of Poplarism, and it's actually a part of the history. Like this street is also a part of the history, and also the graffiti of the street. It's also about the history. So everything just lined up suddenly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so many local residents in Poplar came to our exhibition, and then they didn't know about the history of Poplar. So through our exhibition, they know more about it and then share their experience in like their childhood, and that is really meaningful for us and also very meaningful for the local resident in Poplar as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Yeah, it's lovely to hear that so many people have been coming down, because I know it's very interesting actually for us when we speak with people who, for the people who come to Poplar Union, we get a lot of people that are born and bred in Poplar, their families have been here for generations, and then there's a huge sort of new group of people that are moving into the area that are kind of driving a lot of the change, and in part, whether they're kind of you know, consciously or unconsciously, it's kind of driving a lot of that anxiety as well. So I think it's lovely to hear that people are coming to these sort of shared spaces, and hopefully it will encourage a bit more dialogue between these different groups as well, because I think there's a real sometimes there's a bit of a lack of empathy, I think, when you come into a new community, that, you know, it has this rich history and it means a lot to a lot of the people that live there. So I'm sure your work is facilitating some of that dialogue, I hope.
Yeah. And partly also why the Finborough wanted to be involved with this is because we don't have a community. We're in Earl's Court. Nobody lives in Earl's Court. You live in Earl's Court for a year or 2 years, and then you make some money, and as I think it was George Lansbury said, nobody wants to live in Poplar. They move out as soon as they can. Earl's Court is the same. There's a very small kind of people who have lived here for years, but the general population is really changeable. Very few people last here more than a year, 2 years. So, you know, we have our own rich history. Poplarism had theirs. That was part of the reasoning behind that, to try and instill a bit more community here and celebrate yours. Does that make sense? But you know what I mean.
Absolutely, yeah. Great. Also,
I would like to say I was living in Earl's Court before, like before I moved here. I can feel what was happening there. It's like people changing all the time, and you can't really see people there because they are always working. So yeah, and also we would like to show you like our sculpture now, because we are in the space, so we can.
Please do.
And all have of the origamis and our visitors.
We have this installation in the middle that is really amazing. It was used to be hanging a chandelier, and then we used it to hang a tree branch which we then hang the origami on. We feel really lucky to have the local residents coming over, asking questions and being very curious and joining us in writing down different messages. And yeah, we just hope that this sculpture will just keep growing and growing, and it will be a unique one for Poplar, and at the same time putting the history of Hong Kong, Poplar, and different places, social unrest, into one continuous stream of story and history. Yeah, that's kind of the artistic goal of this project.
Well, thanks so much for showing us that. It's really, really beautiful, and it's also so lovely after, you know, we've had a conversation that we've spoken about huge political change and uprising and protest, but I think it's lovely to end on such a positive note as well, and that change can be brought about through hope and joy and aspirational thinking, as opposed to, you know, struggle or strife, although I'm sure, as we know from the history of the rebellion, that is a big part of it as well. Great. Well, we're coming to the end. I would love to say, if anyone watching has any questions or comments or feedback, please do feel free to ask. You can either do the raise hand function, or you can just take your mic off, because let's all be Zoom rebels and just shout and ask questions. But yeah, so if there are any questions, I should also add this video will be on our YouTube from Monday, so you can also carry on conversations in dialogues and descriptions and technical wizardry like that. So yes, do shout out any questions, but if not, I will let you know that today is day 1 of this 2-day festival from the Finborough Theatre and Poplar Union, and tomorrow we'll have a whole new lineup, 5 new artists from West and East London, showcasing their work in response to the Poplar Rates Rebellion centenary. One work, not wishing to give any preferential shout outs to any of the work, but one that I would like to flag is a piece by Emily and Jodie, which is tomorrow. I can tell you from my piece of paper what time they're going live. I believe it's 11 o'clock. Yes, 11 o'clock. And the reason I'm flagging Emily and Jodie's work is because it's a zine, a digital zine, which sort of functions as a map of Poplar and East London, and it links very cleverly. You can click into it or tap into it, and you get an audio tour. And the idea is that you do the walking tour whilst listening to these sort of historical narratives. So if you don't have any plans and you want to get out tomorrow and enjoy the sunshine, I really recommend at 11 o'clock doing the walking tour through East London. It's a fantastic piece of work, and you'll learn so much more about the history of the area. But yeah, so 10 o'clock, our first piece of work will be going live on YouTube tomorrow. Do check out Poplar Union and the Finborough Theatre's YouTube page. We've got different pieces of art going up on the hour, every hour, from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock. Thank you again to all of our wonderful artists who have been so generous with their thoughts and their feedback today. We've had some lovely thanks in the chat saying thank you. It's been lovely hearing everyone talk, which it has been. And a huge thank you also to Arena, who is our BSL interpreter. Thank you, Arena, who interprets lots of our shows and is an absolute dream to work with. So thank you to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Beth.
Really
Thank you to Beth for running everything, so I didn't have to.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you very much.
No worries. Oh, thank you all.
Really
thank you very much. Yeah. And yeah, keep reading, keep showing East and West London the love. And yeah, we hope you will enjoy a second day of the festival tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
We will.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.